Welcome to Tender Heart.
Double affair. Carl and Diana, and there they were, looking at the infinite, together, as always did during the past years. They were in their hotel terrace looking at the stars with a telescope, identifying rare objects and trying to make this normal situation a special one. What was it that did not work? Well, they were lovers. But they did have their own spouses back at home. They were cheating themselves and their best friends' spouses at the same time. It was a double loop of cheating and they didn't want to admit. Carl was the typical businessman, with a suit and a tie, while Diana was a doctor at a very important hospital in the city. They were cheating their spouses for more than 4 years and no one ever noticed it. Carl would use the excuse of being out on a business trip and Diana the excuse of being in 2 shifts in a row. Their spouses would just trust them, while they would have all the fun in different hotel rooms and good restaurants. Both of them heavily loaded with money from their respective high salaries, they would pick the best food in town and only 5-star hotels. They would take massages, room service, champagne, breakfast to bed in the morning, anything luxurious would be just about right for them. They dreamed of getting married and finally getting rid of their old-fashioned and boring marriages, but it was just not that easy. Their spouses, Brent and Nancy, would know nothing. Except they were meeting each other, every time Carl and Diana were out on business trips and double shifts. They were holding normal jobs, so they did not have as much money as Carl and Diana. They would go to cheap chain restaurants and cheap bars, but only as friends. After so many years of cheating, Brent and Nancy started missing their partners for real, and developed feelings for each other. But they wanted it to be right. They told each other and the feelings were mutual. They agreed that this was not so good and spoke not well of them. Still, they kept on meeting, but without anything happening. Until that night. The night magic happened and they drank a little bit more than usual and, at some point, Nancy kissed Brent. They separated each other immediately and said that if they were doing this, they should do it right. So they allowed themselves to be treated properly under the excuse that it was only a one-time event. Brent and Nancy went to their favorite luxurious hotel restaurant, which happened to be the same as Carl and Diana's night out. Except none of the 4 knew it. Brent and Nancy arrived at the restaurant and saw Carl, who was supposed to be 300 miles away, and Diana, who was supposed to be working the night at the hospital. They couldn't believe it, acted as if nothing happened, and hid behind the plants of the restaurant. Then they observed how Carl and Diana left the hall and took the elevator. They took the stairs to the same floor and observed how their partners entered the same room. Brent and Nancy decided to wait behind the door, listening through it with their ears. "Let's do this the right way," said Nancy. They waited for their spouses to start the action and then knocked the door. When Carl opened it, half naked, he couldn't believe it. All of them started shouting. Security was called by the next room occupants and expelled Brent and Nancy, since they didn't have a room. The day after, when both Diana and Carl arrived at their respective houses, all their belongings were packed in suitcases with a note that said, "Just leave and never talk to me again." They started crying because one doesn't know how much they miss people till they are left behind. Since then, Carl and Diana did nothing but having arguments all the time. They ended up breaking up. Both Carl and Diana saw their exes once after a couple of months. They both regretted it so much. They could not believe their romantic affair could end up so badly. On the other hand, Brent and Nancy started having a relationship. And they ended up living very happily ever after.